Welcome back to BiochemSerye Learning on the Go. We're tackling podcast 3B, Chemistry of Fatty Acids, picking up our lipid series.
Yeah, getting down to the nitty-gritty of these building blocks.
For all our listeners out there who are using these podcasts to study, don't forget to grab the study guide from our website. Helps solidify all this.
Absolutely. It's like your roadmap.
Okay, so fatty acids. What are we even talking about here? What do these things look
Okay,
like?
picture this. A chain, carbon atoms all hooked together.
Like a little conga line of carbon.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Now, on one end of that chain, you've got what we call a carboxyl group.
Carboxyl group. That's,
It's got a carbon double bonded to an oxygen and also bonded to an OH group.
right. Okay, so not just a plain chain, got this carboxyl thing hanging off it.
That's the key. That carboxyl group, that's what makes it an acid, a carboxylic acid.
Carboxylic acid, got it. And why is that so important?
Well, it dictates how the whole fatty acid acts, how it behaves, you know.
Yeah, okay, starting to get the picture. But I have a feeling it's not all that simple, is it? There are different kinds of these fatty acids.
Oh, for sure. Big differences between, your saturated and unsaturated ones.
Saturated versus unsaturated. Hear that all the time, especially with like nutrition stuff. But what's the actual difference, like chemically speaking?
All comes down to those carbon chains we talked about. Saturated one. Every single carbon is bonded to as many hydrogens as it can hold.
Like it's full up, no more room.
Exactly. Saturated with hydrogen. Makes them stable, solid at room temperature. Think like butter.
Ah, okay, so butter, solid. So then if saturated is all about single bonds, maximum hydrogen, unsaturated must be where we get double bonds.
You got it. Unsaturated means one or more double bonds between carbons in that chain. So not fully saturated with hydrogen anymore.
And those double bonds, they must kind of change things up, right?
Absolutely. Double bonds mean kinks in the chain. So can't pack as tightly, they're liquid at room temperature, oils,
So olive oil, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And even within unsaturated, there's more. You've got your monounsaturated and your polyunsaturated.
I'm sensing a pattern here. Mono, one double bond. Poly, more than one.
You're on fire. It's all about how many kinks in that chain. Oleic acid, big part of olive oil, that's a monounsaturated one.
And what about polyunsaturated? Those are the ones we hear about with omega-3s and omega-6s, right?
Bingo! Omega-3s and omega-6s, like linoleic acid. Those are polyunsaturated, and they're essential fatty acids, too.
Essential. Like essential for life essential.
Well, our bodies can't make them from scratch. Gotta get them from food.
Okay, that is pretty essential then.
Important for all sorts of stuff. Cell membranes, hormones, even your brain needs them.
So we'll have to get the scoop on those essential fatty acids. But before we do, I'm curious, are all these fatty acid chains just like straight lines? Or are there other shapes?
You're thinking like a biochemist already. We've got straight chains, but also branch chains where you have like side chains coming off.
So instead of a line, it's got branches.
Exactly. Then there's substituted fatty acids, where something other than hydrogen is attached to the chain.
Oh, so it's not just about the chain, but also what's attached to it.
Right. And those little additions can completely change what the fatty acid does.
It's like each tweak gives it a new personality or something.
Oh, exactly. And finally, we have cyclic fatty acids. They have you guessed it, a ring structure somewhere in that chain.
Okay, so now we've got lines, branches, and rings.
A whole variety. And then there's how we name and categorize all these. But maybe let's give everyone a minute to process all this before we get into that.
Sounds good. This is a lot to take in. We'll be right back to break down those naming systems and get into those all-important essential fatty acids.
Welcome back to BiochemSerye Learning on the Go, ready to dive back into fatty acids.
Definitely. I'm still trying to wrap my head around all the different structures. Straight chains, branches, rings, all those substitutions.
Yeah, it's a lot. And we haven't even gotten into how we name these things. It can get pretty complicated.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. How do we even keep track of all these different fatty acid variations? Their names are pretty intimidating.
That's where naming and numbering systems come in. They're essential for understanding the language of fatty acids. Think of it like a filing system for molecules.
Okay, a way to keep all those fatty acids organized. I'm all for organization. What kind of system are we talking about?
We use two main systems, the delta system and the omega system. Let's start with the delta system. It's all about counting from the carboxyl end of the fatty acid, the one with the COOH group.
Right, the acid part, the business end.
Exactly. So we start at the carboxyl end and number the carbons, and we use the Greek letter delta to show where any double bonds are.
So if I have a fatty acid with 18 carbons and a double bond at the 9th carbon, would be C18.1 delta 9.
You got it. That's the delta system in action.
Okay, delta system check. Now, what about this omega system? How's that different?
The omega system, we start counting from the other end of the chain, the methyl end, a carbon with 3 hydrogens attached.
So we're counting from opposite ends. Why do we need 2 different systems? Isn't that a bit confusing?
Well, it might seem confusing at first, but both systems give us different information about the fatty acid.
Okay, I need an example to make sense of this.
All right, so the omega system is great for grouping fatty acids into families based on where that last double bond is. Like omega-3 fatty acids, the ones in fish oil, they have their last double bond 3 carbons away from the methyl end. Omega-6, like linoleic acid, 6 carbons away.
Ah, so that's how we tell omega-3s and omega-6s apart. It's all about that last double bond.
Precisely. And both systems can be used to describe the same fatty acid. So that C18.1 delta 9 with the double bond at carbon 9, that would also be C18.1 omega 9 in the omega system.
Okay, so it's 2 different ways of saying the same thing.
Yeah, just like 2 different languages describing the same molecule. It takes a bit of practice to get fluent, but it's worth it.
So we've got the basic fatty acid structure down. We know how to name them with 2 different systems. What's next?
Let's talk more about those essential fatty acids. Remember, these are the ones our bodies can't make. Gotta get them from our diet.
You mean the omega-3s and omega-6s, right? I hear they're good for everything, heart, brain, the whole shebang. But I'm a little fuzzy on what they actually do.
Okay, so for omega-3s, the main players are ALA, EPA, and DHA. Alpha-linolenic acid, that's ALA, comes from plants, flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, things like that. EPA and DHA, those are mostly from fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines.
Got it. Plants for ALA, fish for EPA and DHA. But what do they actually do once they're in our bodies?
Lots of things. But one of the big ones is helping build cell membranes. Cell membranes, they're like the borders of our cells, control what comes in and out. They need a good balance of omega-3s and omega-6s to work right.
Makes sense. A healthy membrane needs a good mix. What about omega-6s? What's their role?
Omega-6s, like linoleic acid, they're important for cell membranes too, and they help regulate inflammation.
Inflammation. Everyone's talking about that these days. Isn't some inflammation good, though? Like when you get a cut and your body sends all those immune cells to fix it?
You're right. Inflammation is a natural part of our defenses, helps us heal. But too much inflammation, the chronic kind, that can be a problem. Linked to all sorts of diseases, heart disease, cancer, even Alzheimer's.
So omega-6s are involved in both good and bad inflammation. That's interesting. What makes the difference?
Balance is key. We need both omega-3s and omega-6s, but a typical Western diet is really high in omega-6s and low in omega-3s.
So it's not that omega-6s are bad. It's that we need to make sure we're getting enough omega-3s, too.
Exactly. That's why those fatty fish and plant-based omega-3s are so important. They help keep inflammation in check.
This is making a lot more sense now. So what are some good ways to get the right balance of omega-3s and omega-6s?
The best thing is to eat fatty fish at least twice a week. Salmon, tuna, mackerel, all good choices. If you don't like fish, you can take a fish oil or algal oil supplement.
What about the plant sources of ALA?
Those are important too. Flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, hemp seeds. Add those to your diet to boost your ALA. And your body can convert some ALA to EPA and DHA, though not a lot.
So a mix of plant and animal sources is the best way to go.
Exactly. And for omega-6s, it's not about cutting them out completely. They're still essential. It's more about being mindful of where they're coming from.
What do you mean? Aren't all omega-6s the same?
Not necessarily. Some sources, like the ones in processed foods and certain vegetable oils, like corn oil and soybean oil, too much of those can promote inflammation.
So we need to be choosy about our omega-6s.
Right. Go for healthier sources like nuts, seeds, avocados. That helps keep things balanced.
This is all so helpful. I'm starting to realize how understanding this stuff about fatty acids can help us make better choices for our health.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about understanding how these molecules work and how our food choices affect our bodies.
So before we wrap up our fatty acid journey, any last words of wisdom?
I think the key takeaway is fat is not the enemy. Healthy fats are crucial. It's all about picking the right types and making sure we're getting a good balance of omega-3s and omega-6s.
Well said. And for everyone listening, get ready for a little quiz at the end of this episode to test your knowledge. 10 questions to make sure you're on top of all these key concepts.
Let's see how well you've been listening.
Okay, listeners, time for a little pop quiz. Ready to test your fatty acid knowledge?
Let's see what you've learned.
All right, question 1. What makes a fatty acid amphipathic? Think back to that structure.
Remember, a fatty acid's got 2 main parts, the carboxyl group at one end and the hydrocarbon chain making up the rest.
Right, right. And how does that make it amphipathic? I'm a little rusty on that term.
Well, that carboxyl group with all those oxygens and hydrogens, it's polar.
Polar, meaning?
It's got a slight negative charge at one end, slight positive at the other, makes it attracted to water, which is also polar.
So that end likes water.
Exactly. It's hydrophilic, water-loving. Now, the hydrocarbon chain, totally different story. It's nonpolar.
Nonpolar, so.
No charges, so it's not attracted to water at all. In fact, it tries to avoid it.
Like oil and water, they don't mix.
Exactly. Hydrophobic, water-fearing. So you've got one end that loves water, one that hates it, all in the same molecule.
Ah, that's what amphipathic means. Okay, makes sense. Question 2. What's the main difference between a saturated and an unsaturated fatty acid?
Think about those carbon chains again. Saturated, all the carbons are connected by single bonds, and every carbon's got as many hydrogens as it can handle.
So full of hydrogen. No more room.
Yep, saturated. And those single bonds let them pack together really tightly. That's why they're solid at room temperature. Think butter.
Okay, butter, solid, makes sense. So then unsaturated.
Unsaturated, they have one or more double bonds between carbons.
Meaning?
Well, wherever there's a double bond, you've got fewer hydrogens attached to the carbons. And the double bond makes a kink in the chain, so they can't pack together as tightly.
Oh, so they're not solid.
No, usually liquid at room temp. Oils, like olive oil.
Got it. All right, question 3. Hit me with 2 examples of saturated fatty acids and where we find them.
Palmitic acid, that's a big one. Found in palm oil, of course, but also meat, dairy, even chocolate.
Chocolate. Never thought about the fat in that before.
Another common one is stearic acid. Lots of that in animal fats, beef fat especially. Also in cocoa butter and shea butter.
Okay, 2 down. Now, question 4. Let's have 2 examples of unsaturated fatty acids and where they hang out.
We've talked about oleic acid, right? Main fatty acid in olive oil, that's a monounsaturated one.
Right. One double bond.
For a polyunsaturated example, how about linoleic acid? An omega-6 fatty acid, you'll find it in lots of vegetable oils. Corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil.
All right, on to question 5. What's the deal with these omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids? What makes them so special?
They're essential fatty acids.
Essential meaning?
Our bodies can't make them, we have to get them from food.
Ah, okay, that is essential then, but why do we need them so badly?
Well, they do all sorts of important jobs in the body, like they're a key part of cell membranes, help regulate inflammation, and even play a role in brain health and development.
Question 6. How about explaining that omega naming system again? What's that all about?
It's all about that last double bond in the fatty acid chain. You start counting from the methyl end, the opposite end from the carboxyl group.
Right, the methyl end.
So an omega-3 fatty acid, that last double bond is 3 carbons away from the methyl end. Omega-6, 6 carbons away.
Okay, so it's like a location marker for that last double bond. That's how we tell the omegas apart.
Exactly.
Question 7. Name those 2 essential fatty acids again, the ones we can't make ourselves.
That would be linoleic acid, which is an omega-6, and alpha-linolenic acid, or ALA, an omega-3.
Okay, got it. Question 8. What's saponification all about?
Saponification, it's basically how we make soap. You take a fat or oil and react it with a strong alkali, like lye.
And what happens then? Sounds a little dangerous.
Well, the alkali breaks the fat molecule apart, splits it into glycerol and fatty acid salts.
Fatty acid salts.
Yep, and those are soap. So next time you wash your hands, think of those fatty acid salts getting to work.
Wow, never thought of it that way. Question 9. Why do people hydrogenate unsaturated fats? Like, what's the point?
Hydrogenation, it's basically adding hydrogens to those unsaturated fatty acids. Turns liquid oils into solid fats.
So it's a texture thing.
That's part of it. Makes those oils spreadable and gives them a longer shelf life. Think margarine.
Right, margarine. But isn't there something about trans fats with hydrogenation? Aren't those bad?
Yeah, you have to be careful. Partial hydrogenation can create trans fats, and those are definitely linked to health problems. That's why they're not used as much these days.
Glad to hear that. Okay, last question, number 10. What's lipid peroxidation? And how do we protect ourselves from it? Sounds scary.
Lipid peroxidation, it's when those free radicals attack the double bonds in unsaturated fatty acids.
Free radicals, those are the bad guys, right?
Yeah, they can be. And when they attack fatty acids, they can create harmful compounds that damage cells. It's also what makes fats go rancid, that yucky smell and taste.
Oh, yuck. So how do we stop those free radicals from messing with our fats?
Antioxidants, those are the heroes. They neutralize the free radicals, stop them from doing damage. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables, things full of antioxidants, that's your best defense.
That's great news because I love fruits and veggies. And that's all 10 questions. How did everyone do?
Hopefully you aced it. But if you missed a few, don't sweat it. This is just the start of your fatty acid journey.
Right, this is just a taste. If you want to dive deeper, remember to check out the study guide on the BiochemSerye website. It's packed with diagrams and explanations that will really help solidify your understanding.
And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us.
We're here to help. Thanks for tuning in to BiochemSerye Learning on the Go. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing with biochemistry.